I still remember how excited I was when I got that temp assignment. It was exactly the type of office job I'd been hoping for, something steady, a foot in the door. You know? I thought maybe this was my chance to show I could handle the pace, be dependable, maybe even impress someone enough for a permanent gig. But, oh man, I had no idea what was waiting for me. From day one, things felt off. There was this young woman on the team. I swear, the minute I sat down at my desk, she had this stare like she was ready to pounce. First, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just shy or didn't like temp workers. But it didn't take long for that vibe to turn into something way nastier. She started undermining me even before we'd exchanged a single word. When a task was assigned, she'd accidentally forget to include me in emails or leave me out of meetings. If anyone asked about her work, she'd act all sweet but then toss subtle insults behind my back. The worst part was how openly she mocked me. Not just quiet snickers but loud, cutting remarks right near my workspace. Little comments like, "Oh, you must be new if you don't know how to do this," even when I was just following directions. Or she'd roll her eyes dramatically when I asked a question, like I was a joke for even trying. The other coworkers noticed it too. Some tried to look away, others avoided getting involved. I guess no one wanted to stir up drama or pick sides. The office felt like crossing a minefield every day. I'll admit, at first I tried to confront her. Carefully, politely. Once I asked if we could talk because I felt things were tense. She just laughed in my face and said, "You're way too sensitive. This isn't a daycare." After that, I kept my distance. Honestly, I didn't know what to do. Going to management felt pointless. They acted like temp workers were invisible, like we were just floating in and out with no real standing. I overheard them dismissing complaints from temps before, so I figured it was safer not to rock the boat. Every morning, it took all my willpower not to dread the day. The anxiety was suffocating. I'd feel my heart pound when she strolled over, waiting for the next chance to put me down or trip me up. It got to the point where I'd lie awake at night replaying moments, wondering if I was imagining it, or if I could have handled things differently. The frustration built up like a weight I couldn't shake. But through it all, I kept reminding myself why I was there. I needed that paycheck, and more than that, I needed the work experience to protect my future. I couldn't afford to burn bridges or blow this chance, even if this particular environment felt toxic and cold. So I gritted my teeth and endured. Every overly critical comment, every slight, every smirk. It all just fueled this growing sense of determination inside me. Then, with just 1 week left on my contract, and after seeing how management completely ignored the problem, it hit me. I wasn't going to fix this by playing fair anymore. If no one was going to stand up for me, I'd have to do something myself. Something subtle. Something legal. Something that would get under her skin, but without anyone ever suspecting it was me. That's when I started thinking carefully about how to take back control. How to turn the tables just enough, quietly, anonymously, so it would hurt her career and stop her from ever doing this to someone else. Something that would be lasting, meaningful. My own silent retribution. Once I finally accepted that just brushing off the toxic behavior wasn't going to cut it, I realized I had to get smart about how I approached this. I wasn't about to burn bridges or start some petty feud that would circle back and bite me. This had to be done thoughtfully, almost like chess, not checkers. I had to think several moves ahead. So, I started diving into what I could actually do that was both legal and effective. I spent a bunch of nights reading through workplace policies, HR procedures, and even some forums where people talked about handling harassment and toxic coworkers. The key was to stay professional. No mudslinging, no blatant retaliation. I wanted to undermine my coworker in a way that was undeniable but completely anonymous. The last thing I needed was to make it obvious I was behind it and jeopardize my own future. My first thought was gathering solid evidence. Anyone could say anything, but if I had proof, emails, messages, documented instances where my coworker had crossed the line, that would be the strongest weapon. I meticulously kept notes, dates, times, and specifics about what happened, and I started quietly saving copies of any digital exchanges that showed the toxic side of their behavior. I was careful to do it in ways that couldn't be traced back to me. No personal devices during work, no logging into shared systems. It felt like a balancing act between being cautious and being thorough. Then I thought about the psychological angle. Instead of a direct attack, I could let their own actions speak for themselves, subtly nudging management in the right direction by anonymously flagging consistent issues. missed deadlines, disruptive conduct, or anything that would raise red flags for a higher-up looking for reliable employees. I researched how HR handles anonymous reports, what kind of information they take seriously, and how these complaints influence performance reviews or disciplinary actions. I wanted to make sure that if I filed a report, it would land on someone's desk with enough weight to prompt a serious look, but without any shred pointing back to me. There was also the timing to consider. I debated how long to wait before making any moves. Jumping in too early could look reactionary or petty, which might hurt my credibility. But wait too long and either my contract would end before the damage was done, or worse, the toxic coworker might mess up something irreparably for me or others. It was a tightrope. I had to balance patience with momentum. I kept reminding myself, the goal wasn't to ruin this person's life, just their career trajectory in that place. Enough so future employers or colleagues would hesitate before hiring or trusting them. It was about silent retribution, not vindictive destruction. I even mulled over subtle sabotage tactics that didn't cross lines, like anonymously sending calendar invites that conflicted with their meetings or forwarding work requests that quietly highlighted their failure to deliver on time. But I quickly discarded anything that felt underhanded or unfair, because I wanted to keep my moral high ground. This was about exposing truth, not fabricating it. In the end, I laid out a step-by-step plan. Gather concrete evidence, anonymously report key incidents to HR, and discreetly alert trustworthy supervisors about patterns of unreliability. I'd space out the reports so it wouldn't look coordinated or suspicious. And throughout it all, I'd maintain a wall of anonymity, never engaging directly in any confrontation or hinting at my involvement. At that moment it hit me, this plan was solid. It wasn't just revenge, it was justice wearing a veil. Now, having crafted this careful strategy, I was ready to take the first step, silently and invisibly, into the execution phase of my anonymous retaliation. You know that moment when you finally decide to act, but you're so careful about it that it feels almost unreal? That was me. Sitting at my kitchen table one night, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard as I drafted the first anonymous complaint. I had collected weeks' worth of emails, overheard conversations, and small incidents I'd recorded in a notebook. Every little detail, every nasty comment or abusive demand from that coworker was there, documented. Not because I enjoyed reliving those moments, but because I needed to build a case that couldn't be ignored. Sending that first anonymous tip felt like stepping off a ledge. I wasn't just exposing someone. I was stepping into a shadow. No one in the office knew it was me, which made it easier to bear but somehow far more intense on the inside. I remember thinking, okay, here we go. Now the company owns it. Now let them do their thing. I included everything, not too emotional, just the facts, the evidence, and the impact his behavior had on the team and on me. I wanted my words to speak louder than my fear. After hitting send, I didn't wait for fireworks or instant karma, because honestly, that's not how these things unfold. Instead, I started sending those carefully worded tips to the higher-ups. Sometimes it was a follow-up email with new incidents, sometimes it was an anonymous call to HR. Each message was like a stone dropped quietly into a pond, watching the ripples spread, knowing eventually the waves would reach the right ears. Meanwhile, all the while I was wrapping up my last week at the company. As the days passed, I could see subtle shifts. The coworker who had made my life miserable started getting cold shoulders. I caught bits of whispered conversations, glanced at the HR manager's solemn, focused looks when he thought no one was paying attention. But still nothing explosive. Just this slow, careful unraveling that I had no hand in anymore. Packing up my desk was surreal. It felt like leaving behind a chapter one never wanted to read aloud. The relief of walking away was enormous. I could breathe again, think again. But underneath it all was this anxious knot, wondering how far my anonymous actions would reach. Would they be enough? Would they protect me if the coworker ever figured out it was me? Or would it just stoke the fires for something worse down the line? I remember one evening standing outside the office after my last day, watching the building's lights flicker on as dusk settled in. I was officially an outsider now. The tempest inside that toxic workplace was no longer mine to weather. But the fallout was just starting. I hoped the company would finally step up, and that justice would come quietly but effectively. Yet in all those moments of relief, there was this lingering question that clung to me. Can true peace be found when you're hiding? When your victory depends on staying invisible? As I faded from their awareness, I realized that the slow burn of justice might not be enough to protect my peace. And I couldn't shake the doubt whether anonymity could truly shield me from what was coming. I remember the weeks after everything unfolded. It was like watching a slow-motion ripple spread out across the whole office, even though I wasn't there anymore. The toxic coworker, the one who'd made every day a battle, suddenly found herself at the center of a storm she couldn't control. Rumors started swirling, whispers behind closed doors, and then came the official stuff. Internal investigations. I didn't have to be there to hear about it. People talk, especially when someone's cracks start showing. From what I pieced together, the company took it seriously in the end. They gathered enough evidence, some from the quiet tips I'd left, some from others finally stepping up, to confirm her misconduct. It wasn't just a slap on the wrist either. The warnings were stern, the kind that make even the most confident people look over their shoulders. And then, well, the dismissal. It wasn't immediate, but it was inevitable. She'd built up this fragile persona of control, but once the truth came out, the mask slipped, and there was no going back. The atmosphere in the office shifted, almost imperceptibly at first. The tension that had been like a dark cloud slowly started to lift. People who had been too afraid or unsure to speak up began to breathe easier. Some even reached out to me after I'd left, thanking me in bits and pieces, though I always kept things anonymous. Honestly, I didn't do it for recognition. I just wanted things to change, to protect myself and others from that kind of cruelty. For me, it was a strange mix of relief and something heavier, guilt maybe? Or maybe just the weight of what it took to get here. I kept replaying moments in my head. The harassment I'd endured, the fear of losing this job, the sleepless nights planning my quiet little revenge. It wasn't easy, and part of me wondered if I'd changed in the process. Had I stooped to her level in some way? But then I reminded myself why I did it, not to hurt but to heal. Sometimes standing up doesn't look like shouting or confrontation. Sometimes it's the silent steps you take to protect yourself. This whole experience, brutal as it was, gave me something I hadn't expected. Strength. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, resilient kind that grows from surviving the worst and deciding you won't let it happen again. I realized I had the power to walk away, to say no to toxicity. I didn't have to stay silent anymore, but I also didn't have to fight with fists clenched. There's a certain peace in that. Looking back, I see how much this chapter shaped me. The temp assignment was short, but the impact long-lasting. I went from feeling small and trapped to knowing I could stand tall, even if it was behind the scenes anonymously. And maybe that's the real revenge. Reclaiming your own voice and refusing to be a victim in your own story. Though my chapter in that office ended there, the story doesn't. It's about what comes next, empowerment, healing, and moving forward beyond silent suffering. Because sometimes the loudest victories are the ones no one sees.